So, from your
所以从你的这
observation,
个
it's
观
not
察来
just
说，
that
等
the
于
New
是
York Times,
不光是《纽
basically
约
a
时
whole
报》，
lot
等
of
于西方的
mainstream
整
media
个
in the
主流的
West
主流
were
媒体，
taken down
那个
using
时
the
候用
full
中
weight
国
of the
用齐国
Chinese
之力，
state.
为了
In order to make
2008
the
年的这个奥运
2008
的成
Olympics
功
a
之后，就把
success,
他们
they
全
went
面
all out,
就是
used
用钱就
money,
从那
and
个时候
from
就
that
开始
time on,
动
they
了，所以
started
从
to
那以
buy
后
everybody
他
off.
们就转
So
向了。
after that, they
那
turned.
你觉
Do you
得，
think this is
这个
just
只是
one part
西
of
方社
how
会
the
的媒
CCP
体
has
被
bought
中
off
共搞定的
Western
一部
media?
分？那你
And
觉
do
得
you think,
从
in terms of
这个意识
ideology, the
形
whole
态
trend
上，
of the Western
整个
leftward
和这
tilt,
个
or
整
what
个这个
people
西
call
方的这个
cultural
国情啊，
Marxism,
或者
the
是叫东
infiltration
方的
of
CCP 啊，
communism?
共产主义的
Is there
渗透，
some connection
这
there?
方面
Or is
它
it
有没有一
just
些
that the
联系？
media
还是
by
说媒
itself
体它就
was
是在
bought
后面
off
被
with
钱搞定
money?
了？
Or
还是
is
说
it
它
tied
跟西
together
方
with the
社会的
overall
整个
transformation,
社会的这种
metamorphosis,
蜕
or
变或者改
degeneration
变或者
of
堕落，
Western society?
是连成一
Is there
一体的，
some
或者
kind
是
of
有一定的关
relationship
系的，或者
which
是
came first
哪个
and
在前，
which
哪个
came
在后，或
later?
者他们互
How do
相
you
之
see
间
the
的这种关
relationship
系，
between
你
all
现在
of
是
these
怎么看
things
这个问题
now?
的？
I think it's like
我
this.
觉得
In
是这
practice,
样
there
的
might
啊，
be
就
some
是
slight
说
differences,
它
and
的
the
时
focus
间上
shifts a
可能
bit
会
at
稍
different
微有
times.
一点点
It keeps
差异
getting adjusted at
啊，在
different
重点
stages,
偏
but
向于
overall,
它
you
的
should
不
say
同
it's
点
like
不同
this.
节点会有调
Ever
整，
since the
但
CCP
总体来
started
说
as a
应该
matter
是
of
说
national
它是
strategy
说
to
自
deal
从
with the United
这
States,
个
that
中
is,
共
to
开始
use
对
unrestricted
美国做
warfare
核
against
试来
America.
对付美国的
At
这
that
个
time in the military,
武
there was
朝
that
线
guy
上对付
surnamed
美国的时候
Zhu.
啊，
Some
那个
people
时候
say
因
he
为
was
当
Zhu
时那个
Day's
边境
grandson.
也中共
Actually, he
也
was
有
not.
进驻
He
过
wrote
啊，
that
有
book,
人说他说是
Unrestricted
随时
Warfare,
是吧？
right?
是，因
After
为
that book
他是
came
有
out,
这
at
个
first it
朝
was
鲜
just
章
one
嘛，是吧？
person's view, but
美
later
国
on
那
it
个
was
时候说的
adopted
话
and
呢，
used
只
as
是
national
相似
policy.
点，
Because
但是
afterwards, we
后
also
面
saw a
他
lot
就
of
不
similar
受
things, right?
来
For
来去
example,
去，
Liu
因为我们
Yunshan,
也
who
看
was
了一些
then
分
head of
析，
the
吧？就是
Central
历山大的
Propaganda
这个中
Department,
宣部部
took
长
this
就
idea of
把他们
unrestricted
作为了
warfare
这个
and made the
朝
imaginary
鲜
enemy the
上
United
这
States,
个对付朝鲜
not
上的
Europe,
这个
not
对象
Japan.
啊，
So
一
he
打下
said,
来
how
是
do we
中国，
destroy
不是
America?
欧洲，也不
How
是
do we
日
win
本，
the final
哎，
battle
他
between
说怎
China
么
and the
去
United
跟美国
States?
打赢
So we
仗，
must use a
这
new
政治
form of
意义上
warfare,
对
which
象，
is to use
那么我们要
unrestricted
有一种
warfare,
新型的心
launch
理
an
作战
all
啊，
out,
这
no
个朝
bottom
鲜
line
上
attack on the
也没有
United
体
States.
现的
Because in
全
terms of
方
military
位的这
power,
种
in
火
terms of
力，
economic
因为我们
strength,
的
we
军
are
事
not
战
yet
法，
as
无论
strong
是
as the
军事
US
战
right
术还
now.
不如美国，
So how do
那
we
我们
beat
怎么
them?
打
We
赢
use
仗？
methods
那
that
我
the
就
US has
使
no
用这
way
个
to use.
美国没
That
有
is
办法使用
unrestricted
的手段，
warfare.
就朝鲜
They
战
talk
争。
about
他讲问题
civilization,
是吧？我
right?
们发按
We
描
shoot
述的，
dark arrows from
我
the
们按发
shadows
论
to put
箭
it
是吧？
plainly,
我们
right?
这
We
个造
fire
假的
cold
手
arrows, we
段是
scratch and itch them.
这
We
可以
use
可以
every
打啊，
possible
所以
trick.
这个后面
Maybe
在
then we
中
can
国
win.
也得到了
So after that,
这个
inside the
共识，
CCP,
认为
this
这个
became a
可行，
consensus.
也
They
也是
decided
为
this was
了一段
feasible.
时间，
And after
然后
some
妥
time,
协以
once it
后
proved
作为
feasible,
我
it
们提
became
高
the
效率，
CCP's top
也
national
许之
strategy.
后，
At
也
that
就
point, it
偏好
became
了。
all round.
但是它
Which
晚一
year
点的
was
是大
that?
概
Roughly, I would estimate it
我
started not
我
long
先
after
说
Falun
是你
Gong
的
was
法律
suppressed. It should
公
have
这
begun
个
in a
这个样子
comprehensive
后
way
面
around
才开始。
2005. I feel it
也
wasn't
就
as
是
early as 2000.
2010
You can check it.
年
Search for
2025年
unrestricted
左右
warfare
这
together
个
with Liu
这个
Yunshan.
是
If you
我
search
感
with
觉
those
啊，
words,
应
you'll
该
see
还是
some of
在
Liu
明
Yunshan's
年开
internal
始，你们
speeches.
可以查一下
They're all
朝
online.
鲜
At that
之
time,
战
basically,
后
as
面
head
就
of the
是
Central
13年8
Propaganda
月10
Department.
号，就
Later,
看
he
到
became a
林山
member
被
of the
捕的影响
Politburo
的话，我
Standing
看那
Committee,
个
right? So when
然
he
后那
spoke,
个
he
时候
definitely
就把
represented
类
the
似斗争部
CCP.
队后面他
As
就
for
更
that
小
colonel,
了一
major
点，
general,
所以
whatever,
说他讲
that
到
Jew was a
这
major
个
general, he
但
really
至于
couldn't
说那个
represent the
单
CCP.
肖啊、单
He's
江啊、
like
这
Jin
少
Ken
校
Rong
啊，原来
nowadays
是
or
新
Sima
的这个
Nan
少校
or
少
Zhang
校，
Weiwei. These kinds of
他真的
people.
不能
They
代
only
表
represent one current of thought inside the CCP. Whether that kind of thinking will be adopted in Zhongnanhai, whether Xi Jinping will nod, whether Wang Huning will nod, that's another level, and that level came only after the 2000 and something years. After that, the CCP, as a whole state machine, not only concentrated resources, it also adjusted the entire state structure, the government structure, to operate according to this line of thinking. So later on, if you go and study and investigate in detail, you'll discover that the CCP created many, many new departments. Take the 610 office, for example. That one, without any doubt, you know about it, because it's the tool to suppress Falun Gong. But there are lots and lots of others. Stability maintenance offices, and many, many offices for external liaison. And inside universities' offices that go even beyond the old overseas Chinese affairs offices. In the past, overseas Chinese offices existed in a lot of universities. But afterwards, all kinds of such and such student associations, such and such alliances were set up, a huge number of institutions going all the way down to the county level. Before, many of these things were only at the provincial level. Later, they went all the way down to counties. Take the state security apparatus. Before, there was only the Ministry of State Security. And in each province, there were state security bureaus, which were in practice attached to the public security system, right? They sat behind the provincial public security departments as branches of the Ministry of State Security. Later, those provincial branches became state security departments. They were upgraded, right? And after the upgrade, at that time, there were still no state security bureaus in the counties. But later, at the county level and city level, they started to have state security bureaus too, right? Because according to their needs, this state security work was getting more and more important, right? So step by step, its administrative rank kept getting upgraded. So now, at the county level, there are a large number of institutions related to stability, maintenance, and to conducting unrestricted warfare. So their funding is enormous. The main focus of this whole concentrated effort is in several areas, like I just mentioned. So where are the priorities? How are they ranked? They are adjusted according to different stages. Of course, the first priority is the public opinion war, the information war, the public opinion war, right? And at the core of the information war is the media. The second is Hollywood, of course, because Hollywood is what brainwashes people. Think of Kung Fu Panda, right? And then later all sorts of things. So that slowly China appears very great, right? Then Mulan and other movies came out, right? China's image became positive, right? And then TikTok. Why did TikTok from China end up being better than YouTube, better than all these Western platforms in this area? Because they poured massive resources into it. A huge number of talented people. It's not just about making money. It's for the sake of ideological struggle, right? It's about contending with the US, so they have to break through bottlenecks. So their algorithm is better, and many other aspects are better. They've surpassed America. So now TikTok is basically invincible, right? And over the past 10 years, you can see with your own eyes that in these 10 years, a whole generation, starting from middle school students, has been brainwashed. A lot of them now have no aversion to the CCP. They don't even dislike communism anymore. When we first came to America, I came in 1992, if you walked down the street and someone said communism is a good thing, that would be like you were crazy. In just 30 years, look what it's become. 30 years ago, it was impossible to say openly that you were a socialist, a believer in communism, and still get elected mayor of New York City. You couldn't even get elected village chief. In America, you couldn't even get elected as a village chief because people would treat you like a lunatic. So this has been a gradual brainwashing. The third area is educational institutions, because education is all about grabbing the young people, grabbing the future in educational institutions. This is why Trump was actually very tough. He took a knife to Harvard, right? And in other areas as well. He tried to go all around, and it's not just Western media. He also targeted Chinese language media, and the CCP, for its part, started there even earlier. 20 years ago, earlier than with Western media, they set up something called the Global Chinese Language Media Alliance, right? One of the people later arrested had been its president for one term. That was Yang Hengjun in Australia. He used to be a double agent. He claimed to be a pro-democracy activist, a democracy peddler, a democracy hawker, and he worked at boxing for a while. Later, he went back to China and took part in various National Day celebrations, National Day banquets and such. I was one of the earliest people to expose him. Then he married a 50-cent troll. What was her name? Ran Xiang. Yes, Ran Xiang. He got together with this 50-center and called himself a democracy hawker. How could that possibly be? At that time, they were brazen, utterly unrestrained, and engaging in infiltration and united front work. He once served as president or chair of some association within the World Chinese Language Media Alliance. There were over 700 member organizations, including some of the traditionally most anti-communist outlets. For example, World Journal, Tsingtao Daily, Oriental Daily, and many others. Back when I had just come out of China, these papers were very anti-communist. Later, they all joined this global alliance. So basically, Chinese language media were taken care of. That includes Voice of America. The head of VOA's Asia-Pacific division was a man named Zeng. I won't get into his other background, for now his own father had been with People's Daily, right? After reform and opening, he was the first chief correspondent in the U.S. for People's Daily. Back in the Yan'an era, he already had agent status and had joined the party. So just think what kind of person he was, right? Everyone in the circle knows the chief correspondent for People's Daily here and the chief correspondent for Wenwei Po, like Tang Yuhua. He was later arrested as a CCP spy. So how could the People's Daily correspondent not also be one? If he himself was a CCP spy stationed in the U.S., how good could his son possibly be? At the very least, he's not going to be anti-CCP, right? But Voice of America, in principle, was supposed to be full of anti-CCP people, yet little by little, VOA completely tilted over to one side. So I think the media is the first piece. Then there are other sectors. For example, I worked in finance for a while, and in finance I watched Wall Street fall, step by step. One of my friends, someone you know, a friend you also know, Peter Navarro, he hates Wall Street the most. He calls these Wall Street people maggots, right? Wall Street maggots. Because he's an economist, he understands better than anyone how these Wall Street people degenerated and were bought off by the Chinese government. As for the process of buying off Wall Street, we don't need to go into all of that here. Then there's the meddling in politics. Wall Street used to be market-oriented. Business people are relatively easy to buy off. The hardest group to buy off is the political class, because politicians stand under the spotlight. They are under scrutiny. They have voters. Right? They must answer to their voters and answer to the media, and they must present a clean image. That's very important. But once they started targeting politicians, that basically meant America was on the verge of falling. Why? Look now at how many big U.S. cities have Chinese-American mayors, including PhDs and so on. San Francisco's Chinese-American mayors, members of Congress, state legislators in various states. Whenever the person is Chinese, let me put it this way. In the background, 100% of them have the CCP behind them. Because if you're not a CCP person, you absolutely won't get elected. First of all, you rely on Chinese votes. If the CCP doesn't endorse you, how are you going to get elected? One example everyone knows is Xiong Yan, also an old friend of mine, a Tiananmen student leader. He's naive. He spent his whole life in the army, right? He thought that by becoming a pastor and relying on his personal influence, he could get elected. So he went to New York because there are many Chinese there. went to Flushing, right? He wanted to run for Congress. Once he ran, he fell into a pit. Because over there, it's all Chinese associations. They told him clearly, if you don't stand with us, you have a 100% chance of not being elected, because we control everything. Flushing is basically like a small Chinese town. In reality, it's the Chinese government in control. We've known this for a long time. So they said, if you want votes, if you want to win, without our endorsement, it's simply impossible. Later, Zhong Yan realized what was going on. He sort of fell into their trap. I believe he still didn't defect to the CCP, but he went and held joint events with them, even said some things about Tiananmen Massacre that weren't quite right. He fell into the pit. They dug a hole for him. He thought he was fooling the pro-CCP crowd. I'll fool you. You support me, right? Once I get in, I'll turn around and go after you. That's probably how he calculated it. He later told me that himself. But what happened was, once he did that, the whole world thought he had gone over to the CCP. After he jumped into the pit, now everyone believes he's pro-CCP or has already defected. So the CCP played him once and then threw him away. Of course he didn't get elected. I think he got less than 1% of the vote. Because as long as the CCP doesn't endorse you, you understand this very well. It's impossible under the current situation among Chinese Americans for anyone who does get elected. Basically, 100% of them are CCP people. I'm saying 100% of the ones who make it are CCP people. We all know about John Liu, right? So in today's New York mayoral race, Memdani is really a continuation of John Liu. John Liu has been around for many years. I dug into him back in the 2000 and something years, around 2008, right around the Olympics. That was when the CCP launched a full-scale offensive. He almost got elected. If it hadn't been for us and Falun Gong practitioners and everyone together boycotting him. At that time, we even formed a committee to recall John Liu, a committee to remove him. Everyone put in a huge amount of effort and exposed his true face, and in the end, he failed at the last step. He didn't get in, but the gap in votes was actually not that big, because his campaign funds far exceeded those of his opponent, as the CCP gave him huge amounts of money. Because he didn't win, the CCP has never gotten over it. They've always wanted to take New York. This time, with Memdani, he is definitely backed by the CCP, because now all the Chinese are supporting him, so he's just a new face. Instead of a Chinese face, they've switched to a Muslim face, or maybe a black face, but he is still a CCP person. Look at Antifa. The backer behind them now is the CCP. Over 90% of the Muslims making trouble now are supported by the CCP, right? Including the Antifa people now being exposed. So they've begun entering the political arena. I can give another example from politics, an example that absolutely offends some people, so I won't mention the name. There was someone who used to be one of our comrades in arms, who later went back to China and became a high-level strategic advisor. A senior strategic advisor to the CCP's top leadership, director of the Tsinghua Institute of International Strategy, right? And also director of Fudan University's American Studies Institute, that kind of rank. He told me, if we want to settle one member of the U.S. Congress, it's very simple. Each of us, for example, say we're targeting Nancy Pelosi, just as an example. Each one of us is responsible for a particular person. Then I can claim and be reimbursed for $5 million US. This was more than 10 years ago. For example, if I invest a certain amount of money into a given member of Congress, buy a house for them, whatever, as long as I use some clever method, say, buy a house for $1 million, I don't even need prior approval from my superiors. I just go back and claim reimbursement, and it's done. When I heard that, at the time, I was extremely shocked. This was many years ago, more than 10 years ago, when I was still in New York.